Hello, and welcome back to Dev Game Club, a weekly podcast in which two veteran game developers look at games from the past to discuss their relevance and impact today. I'm Brett Duville, and I'm joined as always by my co-host, a man who is a descendant of the well-known clan of Ognelmit.
Tim Longo. What?
Oh my God. You don't know what?
That's
OG-NOL,
my
MIT.
name backwards?
Yes.
Is that that's my eternal name?
It is. Well, you know the Roivas family.
Oh, got it. Uh-huh.
Did you not follow that they were the Savior family?
The Savior family. What do you mean? No.
Roivas.
Oh, no, I never saw that until just now. Did you see that the first time you played it?
I don't recall, but I definitely saw it tonight. We are, of course, just starting a new series. We were going to have an interview tonight. We'll talk about that probably later on, but we'll schedule it at some point. It's just some scheduling troubles. But yes, we are talking about Eternal Darkness. We're starting a new series because it is the month of October, so things get spooky on Dev Game Club because I like horror games. I wish there were more of them that were good.
Yeah, for sure.
But it has been a pleasure of ours to do this the last few years. You know, we started with Resident Evil, we did Silent Hill 2, and now we are turning to Eternal Darkness.
Thief. We did Thief.
And we did Thief, that's right, which we did as a sort of horror game. Kind of more of a mood piece as far as horror goes than kind of direct horror.
Maybe a thriller.
It had some supernatural elements too, though. So
fought zombies.
Yeah, sure. There were ghosts, right?
And and some of those levels, like they had the weird
from beyond kind of and you fought an elder god basically.
The elder god. Yeah. I think we're in the ballpark.
Yeah.
But Eternal Darkness, definitely one close to my heart. To the degree where when I saw it at Pink Gorilla 6 months ago or so on the shelf, I bought it immediately, even though it's actually a little bit rare, not very common, and tends to be more expensive than I want to pay for a used game. So I had it just kind of there just because I wanted to own it. I had one in the past that I got rid of for some dumb reason. But when it came up, then I wanted to find a copy for Brett too. So a bit of a fiasco getting it to you, but
just in time.
Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. So, but this is something else, this game. I'm really happy we're playing it. Starting it again brought back a lot of good memories immediately, for all sorts of reasons we'll talk about. But it's going to be a fun one for October.
Yeah. For me, it was probably one of the earliest horror games I played. In the same year, I would have played the Resident Evil remake. on GameCube, and this was really, we were talking about a pre-show. This was really kind of, in North America at least, the year of GameCube.
Holy cow! Yeah, they just did not mess around. This
was the year. Not only did they have Eternal Darkness, which of course was third party, although sort of not. I mean, I think Nintendo had their sort of fingers on the scale with this one. But there was also Metroid Prime, huge impact for us. Like I said, the Resident Evil remake, but also Resident Evil 0, Zelda, Legend of Zelda Wind Waker. Help me out. I'm missing
Animal Crossing,
Super Mario Sunshine as well, Animal Crossing. I mean, this was a GameCube year. It's maybe not a super distinguished year otherwise, other than having Kingdom Hearts and Hitman 2, both of which we've played.
Splinter Cell.
And Jedi Starfighter.
Little game called Jedi Starfighter. Splinter Cell, maybe, and Ghost Recon were ones that I'd maybe mention a little bit. But as far as like some of the other years we've played, other than like Hitman 2 and stuff, they're really Spyro, Jak and Daxter you mentioned. Was it Jak and Daxter?
No, Ratchet and Clank.
Ratchet and Clank, okay, yeah.
Yeah, not Spyro. There's a Spyro like port to something I think this year, but Ratchet and Clank. There was some. Sly Cooper. Star Wars Jedi Knight 2, Jedi Outcast. So.
But it's no like 1998 or
right. It's not a 98 or 2004 or any of the years from now to like 2010, because we're like in a golden age of way too many video games. Also saw Warcraft 3 Reign of Chaos, but I'm not sure if that's an expansion.
No,
that's the base game.
Yeah, that's the base game.
Okay, so another big game from that year.
Yeah.
I mean, some other stuff that's certainly notable. It's just not like some other years in terms of the ones that leave kind of long-term lasting impressions. But it's a great year for the GameCube. It's a good year to be a GameCube owner. And I was a very early GameCube adopter. I had a GameCube after getting a PlayStation 2, but we were given a PlayStation 2 at LucasArts. So this is the first one I actually got for myself, I guess. Anyway.
Yeah, and I think to piggyback off of a point you hit slightly there earlier, this was, with both this game and Metroid Prime, which we've probably hit on a little bit, even though these were made by third-party developers, in both cases published, well, obviously with Metroid, it was working with a Nintendo property, but published by and only for the GameCube, so published by Nintendo. And so Nintendo, more than a lot of first-party, can tend to get more hands-on, as probably listeners know. And with this game specifically, looking at the credits, for the top level credits really quickly to refresh my memory, other than Dyack being a director, Hishida and Yamada were both also co-directors on this game. And then as far as producers, which are listed, Miyamoto and Iwata are both listed.
Right.
So, that means
they have a thumb on the scale. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they give feedback, right? I mean, this game feels more like a Nintendo horror game.
Yeah.
Than Resident Evil does on the same system in the same year.
For sure. Yeah.
And having played that at the time, although when Resident Evil 4 would come out, I think 2 years later, don't hold me to that, but I think that's right. It felt different. And that was one that felt more native to the system. They were also at the time, they were in the middle of the Capcom 5 or 6 games that were being delivered for them. But to your point, Metroid Prime is another game that has Nintendo's fingers all over it. I mean, it's their franchise, but it is developed by, was it Retro?
Retro, yeah.
Yeah, Retro, in, I think, Austin, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And they're still around, actually. And I believe they're working on the new one. Yeah. Yep. Oof, that's so exciting.
Which wasn't the original plan.
Yeah. No, it wasn't. Right. Yeah. And it didn't work out. Whatever the original plan was. Anyway, but that's another game that you definitely can tell they had a lot of feedback on, because it plays like adapting that first person thing to a Nintendo system in a way that I don't think any other first person game quite had achieved, at that time. So,
yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, this one, I think as you start playing it, I think to Brett's point, you immediately see its differences, in the space. In both Metroid's case and Eternal Darkness's case, let's see. So no, actually, I'll take that back. Metroid was re-released on the Wii. Is that right? The trilogy?
It was, yes, as part of the trilogy. Yeah.
So Eternal Darkness actually is, for whatever reason, which we did not do our research on and may not even be able to find, I don't think it's even very publicly known, what the deal is with this game. I assume it has to be tied up from a property perspective somehow with Silicon Knights, which is just a whole mess.
Right.
Still, I think technically exists, but is obviously sort of defunct and not doing much now. There was a crowdfunding sort of campaign for the sequel for a while, that I guess didn't go anywhere. Anyway, Silicon Knights is a whole podcast by itself, which we won't get into too much. But this game was never available. Unlike Resident Evil, which had remakes and obviously a long series, this is a weird, and Silent Hill and all the other horror games we've played, this has never been anywhere else. hence the difficulty kind of getting it to play at all. Luckily, you can play GameCube games on Wii, so I didn't have to buy a GameCube. But I think that sort of has added to a bit of its no pun intended mythos and around it, because it's one of the few games that was available on the GameCube and has never really been seen since. It would be a great game on the Switch or something like that.
Absolutely.
Who knows where it's stuck? So because of that, the reason I'm bringing this up is it's become a little bit of a cult hit in a way too, right? I think a lot of people think back on Eternal Darkness fondly, but probably most of those people have not had the ability, because of its sort of status, to replay it in a long time, because it isn't that easy to get unless you kept your copy in your GameCube or whatever.
Well, it's a game that didn't sell well enough, I think, that it's been up there, to justify Nintendo's interest. I mean, a 500,000 seller isn't really something they want to get out of bed for, right? I mean, they have big franchises that crank out money for them, right? That they use in lots of different ways, that they sometimes apply their characters to. And this is sort of, if you add in the fact that there's probably some rights issues, the details of which they've got to be, because Nintendo owns the trademark to the name, but who knows who, like, the code and assets, like what the story is there. I mean, it's not obvious how that would all shake out. But
yeah, I think the thing for me though is that they don't have a horror property. Like, yes, it didn't sell well originally, but I think that there was a lot of other variables, including the GameCube itself, that contributed to that. Since this game, they basically have just been making deals with partners to fill that horror gap. You already mentioned the most famous example, which would be Resident Evil 4, which was originally a GameCube exclusive, and then eventually it was ported, but on everything, including phones,
still being ported, yes.
And still being ported. It's on the Switch now. So you know what I mean? Like, I'm obviously I'm projecting my own desires onto Nintendo, but it seems like it's got to be a rights issue, because it's something that, at least for the hardcore, is looked back fondly. So they could have rebooted or something. Like, they're still doing Metroid Prime, at least. So
sure. I mean, but there's also a question, and I didn't expect to talk about any of this, but I mean, when you talk about Japanese companies, I think they often have a Japanese lens through which they look at the game's success. This is a game that sold fewer than 20,000 copies in Japan.
Yeah. That's fair.
Right. And they don't look at the other 480,000 copies and go, oh, good. They look at, oh yeah, this didn't sell here. This is not, they basically, I think, look at that and go, this is not for us. Whereas Resident Evil, right, huge success for them. Relatively speaking. So I think it's just, there's a lot wrapped up in that, and more than we can probably dig into. Yeah. And certainly I cannot understand, or I don't think any mortal man can really understand the mind of Nintendo. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of issues why this would not be. And of course, even for a big successful publisher like Nintendo, there's only so much time. Yeah. Right? People are still asking after Mother 3 and, whatever. And
yeah,
I'm sure there's a number of things they'd rather spend time on.
They have a deep bench of things they could pull out that they don't. Yeah.
I mean, give me my Kirby Dream Course 2, please.
I know, after playing that on the SNES Classic.
Best golf game ever.
Yeah, I agree with you now. It would be good for a Switch, but who knows? Maybe there's one we don't know about. Seeing that we just discovered that the first time on that system.
There's probably a SNES, the online SNES Classic thing that'll probably come to that. So.
Oh yeah, true.
SNES Classics.
The other thought that I had, which were a little kind of like tangentially, topically related now, we've kind of meandered into another kind of Nintendo focused sort of topic. But the other thought that kind of comes to me too is, as much as I want Nintendo to play in the more mature area, since the GameCube, they really haven't done that very much at all. They, making, even if they were to create a new horror IP that's Nintendo only, I don't even know if that's what they're in the business of doing. They're really more focused on, the E for everyone sort of area.
Yeah, and I mean, I think they also they want the what's the Disneyland thing? Haunted house, I guess, right? Haunted. It's a haunted ride.
Luigi's Mansion.
Yeah, I was going to say the Luigi's Mansion is kind of where they go for horror,
Haunted
right?
Mansion. Yeah.
Yeah, Haunted Mansion. Haunted Mansion, is that the thing in the parks? Okay, yeah. Sorry, it's been a long time since I've been to a Disney park. Yeah, so I mean, it's kind of like, it's kind of that. That's where they kind of go, right?
That's
is
their
that
response,
let's do a mechanical thing. Yes, it'll kind of be spooky, but it'll be kind of lightly spooky and kind of comically spooky and feel like a Disney kind of level of horror. So I think that that's also, part of where their heart's at, which I totally respect. I've actually always loved that about them as a company, that I can sort of trust that they are not going to go in a very, very dark direction. So even not knowing a lot, about individual games that my kids might want to play, I could feel like, well, it's okay. It's a Nintendo game. It's going to be okay. That's a trust, I think, that they take upon themselves.
Yeah. I mean, the Resident Evil 4 is a good example. I think they've kind of moved to a place where their first party stuff is within a certain set of rules, but then they make deals. Like, for instance, you've brought it up. We talked about it, I think, as an example with Devil May Cry, in that they published Bayonetta 2, right?
Right. Yeah. And they've got Bayonetta 3 coming. So
yeah, and so they rekindled something that is M or more M. I don't know if that's M. I assume it is. I
believe so. Yeah.
But it's just not kind of in first party realm. So it's like, well, we have that stuff. We're making sure that we have that stuff on the platform, but it's not part of our sort of our persona.
Right.
So anyway,
yeah, and it's kind of comically cheeky as well. That game, those games. I assume 2 is similar to 1. I didn't finish 1. I have them both for the Switch, because me. And they just have a different feel to them. They're very playful, even in their kind of weird, dark, I'm a witch battling angels and demons and things, kind of
they fit
story. Yeah, they kind of fit. I mean, if you squint, it's like, oh, this is sort of them maybe going to the sort of more, I don't know, anime aesthetic or something like that. Whereas to bring it back to Eternal Darkness, I mean, just in the title, of course, it's a little darker, but also the focus of the thing is cosmic horror, which is actually fairly unique in video games, at least in sort of big mainstream games, and always kind of has been.
Oh my goodness. Sorry. I just read a couple of the key voice actors for the game. I just entered onto that.
Okay. We should probably get back to that in a later episode.
Yes, we should, but we definitely need to get back to it, because it's
making a note of it now.
Yep. I was surprised. It was enough to mention.
Okay.
Yeah. So Eternal Darkness, Sanity. What's Sanity's Requiem? Yeah, Sanity's Requiem.
Yeah, Sanity's Requiem.
So, great.
But also, as I was saying, cosmic horror, right? Which
cosmic horror. Yep.
We've talked about we've talked about in terms of Cthulhu, generally speaking, but also just it's a broader term that people like to use, I think. We were talking pre-show about how we'd love to cancel Lovecraft as a person, because often it really seeps into his fiction, but some of the ideas are pretty interesting. So it's just kind of, it's hard to know what to do with all of that. You do you out there. I haven't read Lovecraft in years because I find him kind of hard to read, and he kind of makes me want to laugh to read him these days. It's not the right response, so I've kind of given up. It's just so lugubrious.
Yeah, I can't.
There's a style there, and it just once it stops connecting with you, it stops connecting with you, and it's very hard to get that back.
For sure, pulp magazine, kind of feel to it. But
like you can tell that guy was getting paid by the word.
Yeah, yeah. And I for better or for worse, have always been a big Cthulhu fan. I love cosmic horror stuff. And just have become disappointed later in life of finding out more and more and understanding more and more about what his subtext really was saying in many, stories. And so now I'm kind of bummed because I have this now love-hate relationship with the fiction, because of the artist behind it. My memory though of Eternal Darkness is it's inspired by, but I don't think it's direct, right?
No, it's definitely not. I mean, I've already forgotten the name because lore, but the main bad evil god made of eyes and mouths at the bottom of that pit is
Magaroth. I'm just making that up. It starts with an M, but
it does start with an M, but after that you lost it. But anyway, whatever that character's name is, I don't believe that's taken from anywhere else, and
I don't think so. No.
Yeah, and
there's
it's its own thing, and there are things going on here that are definitely their own thing that are separate. But the idea of sort of an ancient temple that goes deep into the earth, and that there's a old god or whatever, Mantorok, the corpse god, pinned under there, that Pious, whatever his name is going to try to kill over time, right? I mean, it's but I mean, the other thing too is that the Roivises live in Rhode Island.
Yeah, right.
So I mean, they both are and aren't tying it to Lovecraft. Lovecraft, for those who don't know, was born in, or at least lived in Providence, Rhode Island. I can't now remember if that's where he was born.
Yeah, I don't remember either.
That's where they have the big con every year.
Yeah. He's buried there, right? I believe. Yeah.
I assume that his body was drawn and quartered and was buried in multiple places, so it would never be reunified.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Probably wise. Somebody thought of that one.
Mm-hmm.
I can't. Pious Augustus?
Yeah, Augustus sounds right.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
The names just go straight in and straight out. I think it's
I think we'll come back to that too, because I think that's sort of like a byproduct of the structure of the game, which is also an interesting structure, but it does mean that you don't spend as much time with characters as you may want sometimes.
Also me.
Yeah, that's true. You have an additional tax on caring
on game lore. Yes.
Caring about this stuff, so that makes it doubly hard. I mean, one thing to your point about sort of like the sort of tone and sort of way that Lovecraft writes. I think this game, though not directly quoting from him, I think the first quote, at least, I don't know if everyone gets different quotes, but the quote I got at the beginning of the game was a Poe quote.
Yeah.
Probably because it's public domain, and so they can stay away from Lovecraft. But the game itself is very much like his writing in that it is just completely taking itself seriously and having a high old, chewing the scenery time with everything going on, and everything is at its most dire, straight from the intro, right? Both the intro, so there's sort of like a mini movie that starts the game, that is like a montage of scenes that are cosmic horror-y, and you're not really sure what they all mean, but definitely something big is happening. Yeah. And it just feels like, the end times kind of thing, right? Eternal darkness, whatever. And then there's also, a character dies right away in that it's your grandfather, I believe.
Yes.
And so you just jump right into it. And I actually had forgotten and was surprised at how quickly that moves.
Very quickly.
It's like,
I had also forgotten. I was like, oh, wow, this is quick. Like, what's going on here? It's good. It's a good intro. It's amazing that it still surprises. So
yeah. Well, and then, it's like, not only does the sort of plot devices of it move quickly, but then she's also very quickly there because I think she's in Seattle, right? She's going to she's in Washington when she gets the call, and then the body's still on the ground when she gets to Rhode Island.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Like, oh, okay.
She must have had a helicopter waiting.
Yeah, this doesn't.
My grandfather could be, murdered by forces from beyond at any moment.
Yeah. Even that, I think, would
it'd be hard to.
They wouldn't leave the body there that long. But anyway, it doesn't matter. But you jump right in, and so that's it's just it's cool. It's fun if you embrace it. That it is. Yeah. With a comparison of another horror game we played for the podcast in our October Fest, whatever we call it, where I felt like Silent Hill 2 was a good example of a lot more mystery and question up front about what was happening, and why you were there and what the goals were and what the motivations were, etc. And there's some of that here, but this very much is the opposite of that for me, and that everything kind of wears its intentions on its sleeve for the most part. And you're even introduced very early to some of the big bads that you mentioned, so we won't get in, I don't want to jump ahead, but anyway, just the early moments moving into the game proper as we're going through the episode. I just wanted to kind of mention that the stakes seem high and you get right to it.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a good point. And it's funny because I think some of the things that the game's very effective at, namely the insanity effects, basically don't really start to appear. I mean, I had some very slight effects occur, some, bleeding in the walls, but that could have just been part of what was going on, right? There's nothing overtly insane about it.
Did you let your bar go all the way down?
I did not.
Okay. So
if you do that, I'm sure it gets much worse.
Yeah. Well, so I've made for the audience and for you, which I didn't tell you in pre-show, I have made a vow that I'm never going to fill my bar. I'm going to leave it empty the whole game. I'm basically going to be the most insane I can be the entire time, which I have.
Whereas I, Tim, am a person who never has an empty bar.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Good one. You're quick. I'll give you that. Different bar. We're talking about different bars here.
Oh, right. The insanity meter.
Insanity meter. Yes. And so, for instance, I had you go into a room and fight, and I think you may take extra damage, or there's more enemies or something, and then it resets and you're outside of that room again. Where that happens, where essentially you die and then it says, "Oh my God, what just happened?" And then you're outside of the room like you never went in.
That's an insanity effect.
Yeah, so it's like a fake playthrough of a room, and then you get reset, so it doesn't count.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I had the one where you sink into the ground and below the ground. Have you ever had that one? Remember that one from the old days where
I had that one? Yeah, back then. Yeah, there were a lot that I saw back then, and I'm not actively trying to prevent it in a crazy way. I'm just playing kind of normally.
You're doing the finishers though and stuff. Yeah,
I am doing the finishers. Yeah.
Yeah, so I just leave them there. I don't do the finishers. Anyway, it's just an experiment. I'm just gonna. I believe I actually the first time I played this back in the day, I think I might have done the same thing, or I was largely insane most of the game. But this time I'm definitely gonna embrace it because I just want to see what happens. And I also chose. I guess we're kind of bouncing around. You want to talk about the choice? You want to talk about the?
Yeah, let's talk about the sort of. Yeah, let's talk about the structure and the choices, and talk more about the insanity effects when I've seen more of them.
Yeah.
And I also want to talk a little more about certainly the survival horror, just kind of base mechanics here, and we can talk about combat as part of that, I think.
Yeah.
But let's talk about the sort of central early choice that Pious Augustus makes. I guess it's Pious Augustus, right? You go and you pick up all these different granite stone blocks, and they're a puzzle thing, but they're also a big thematic element in this temple that he's somehow gotten warped into. And not a lot has happened in the game at this point. You're basically reading this chapter from this book as Ms. Roivas, our savior. What's her name? Alex, right?
Alex, yeah.
Yeah. And
you found a secret room, right, in the mansion.
Right. Yeah, so you're at the mansion. You do a lot of sort of what feels very Resident Evil-y, kind of run around the house, see if you can find stuff. Oh, here's a key. I don't know what that's for. Oh, let me go, see what I can do. Find, and then you find, there's a clue what time the clock is set to. You set the clock in the library to that, and it opens a secret passage, and that takes you to the real study, the real library. And that's when you start reading the history of the Roivas family, maybe at least of history.
Some sort of lineage connection there, yeah. In a book that is also very Lovecraftian in its, which the Necronomicon is a sort of trope at this point.
And this, of course, is the Tome of Eternal Darkness,
right? Which
is a nice meta call out because it's the book about the game,
right? Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which as you read it, you play the game.
Yeah, it's folding in on itself, which is cool.
That's also very sort of cosmic horror thing.
Yeah.
I mean, and something that's very common in those early Lovecraft works, for example, In the Mouth of Madness, for example, right? So,
yep.
And writers and their madness and what impact they have upon the world is kind of all over that early pulpy cosmic horror as well.
Right. So and language and names and
right.
Yeah,
and the power of all that stuff.
To your point about reading the pages, I think another thing that is very cosmic horror centric is the way that history and time, especially ancient times, is influencing the modern day, or in Lovecraft's case, the 20s or what have you. And so I always thought that it was a cool, I don't know, maybe semi-obvious, but a cool way to do it in this game, in that the pages of the book end up becoming the levels. You mentioned Pious. And as she starts reading, you are transported to that sequence that she's reading about, to make it playable. So, there's always, Lovecraft always does talk, there's various stories talk about the ancient times and ancient, players in this proverbial game of when the Necronomicon was written or what have you, or the person that translated it, etc. But you often don't really see the world through the eyes of these ancient characters. And here I thought it was always cool that they chose to actually make that stuff playable, and you see it firsthand, essentially.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, it also it ties in with a lot of the sort of general focus of the board games or the role-playing games, where you're usually associated in some way with Miskatonic University, for example, where you do research. You're finding these, these libraries with some musty old tome that nobody's picked up in 100 years, and you're finding that one nugget of information that's going to tell you how to kill whatever that you're up against, and you'll probably lose. My experience playing the board games is any indication. But yeah, I mean, it's always been a big part of it. I mean, some of that is his New England roots, and sort of that being kind of the seat of a lot of American academia historically. Of course, Providence, Rhode Island has Brown University, and he would have been far from Harvard or Yale. So yeah, there's just kind of as well as any number of others, but those are kind of the big ones that have been around a long time. So I think all of that is kind of modeled on those sorts of things. Here it's a private library, which is kind of, it's its own interesting thing. It's this family is trying to protect maybe its secrets, you don't really know, or even just trying to understand its origins and what it's been up against. Who knows? But it has that feel of some of those more, as you said, 1920s kind of feel stories.
Well, we also have narration, right? The voiceover work of the grandfather at first, essentially talking through, I guess he's reading what she's reading in his voice. Is that, or I guess that's
reasonable. Yeah.
Yeah. And so you kind of have him putting the pieces together for you as she's reading it, which is, also a lot of Lovecraft stories are written sort of in that first person sort of like, or maybe all of no.
Probably not all of them, but
not
many
all of them, but
yeah.
most of them. I feel
most
like
of them, the ones you would remember. I think most of them.
Yeah. So I think that fits well within the themes and the feel, of hearing somebody going through the thought process and describing what horrors they came upon. But then, as Brett mentioned,
or not describing them because they're indescribable,
right? Or indescribable, or leaving. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Not describing in detail, but more of their sort of mental state and reaction.
Exactly.
To
how
it,
how they reacted to this impossible thing that they're seeing or whatever.
And that's, I think that is often one of the strengths of Lovecraft, even though he did overtell things. I think that, most of the time he didn't really describe things in sort of like a very modern, detailed way. It was more of, like you said, indescribable. That was sort of the whole concept. And then, but yeah, the big surprise I remember back when I played it originally was that character swap, where you have this nice moment where they have a desaturated, sepia tone page, still frame of almost like a sketch, if you will, but it's really just probably a Photoshop filter. And then it bleeds into real time, and you're now playing as Pious Augustus in Roman times.
Yeah. And it bleeds the language from Latin into English as well.
Yeah, very well done.
Nice. Yeah,
a la Red October kind of Hunt for Red October feel going on there. And so that I remember back then, obviously a lot of the PR around the game and, oh my, this is a GameCube's horror game and it's a new property and blah, 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 and being excited about it. Didn't really know or think that you'd be playing as multiple characters, so it's like, oh wow, I thought, Alex was the focus of this.
Right.
Now, yes, Resident Evil, you could play as two characters, but they're both in the same time, they're both in the same house, so they're really
and
it wasn't
you pick
really
one period, right? You play a whole game, as one, yeah.
So it's pretty ambitious, as we'll find out through the series, to how many characters you play as. But even just switching to the Roman character, I thought was cool. And then it's kind of neat because they start walking you through the history of the family. I guess I don't remember if Augustus is.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't remember. So I honestly, I wouldn't have remembered 10 minutes after I finished the game. So,
well, let's assume that all the stories for now, from our playing this one episode, are connected in some way.
Well, they're all connected via this force on Earth.
Yes, right.
So at the very least, and I think that Augustus is not, because I think it's actually because the heart that's put
more
in
the antagonist. Yeah.
Yeah, the heart that's put in what's her name is, is kind of the thing. I think that is what's carried down through the bloodlines. Although that doesn't really track necessarily either, based on what happens to her. So it's hard to say.
Well, we'll come back to that probably over time, especially as we play more and more characters. One quick note that I wrote down that I never would have thought of ahead of time, but I had a little bit of an Assassin's Creed moment. Because of the memory time switching, the whole Animus thing, right?
Where interesting. Yeah.
If you think of Assassin's Creed as a sort of macro franchise, it's very similar, right? It's a modern day character or characters plural living lives of ancestors through, the Animus in that case, but in this case it's whatever imagination. I don't know.
Right.
They don't really ever probably tell you, why you're living it this way, but more gamification. But anyway, I thought that was interesting.
They tell you why.
Do they?
I mean, you're unlocking your genetic memories, and there's a whole thing
in this game.
Oh, in this game. I'm sorry.
No, yeah. In Assassin's Creed, they probably, in my opinion, go too far in explaining what's going on.
That's probably true. Although they kind of, I'm in the middle of another Assassin's Creed right now, so.
And you've played way
I've played
more
a bunch of them. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
In this game, I want to read it more as like there's such power in the book itself that it transports you there, that it's more like what the book itself carries, because it is this tome of eternal darkness, right? I mean, it feels like a massively important thing, just like, Ash reading the Necronomicon, takes him to the land of the dead or whatever in Evil Dead 2, right? It's just, it's part of what the thing is, right? Is that
we should have
what?
No, that's a good catch. Mentioning Evil Dead,
yeah. Well, we were talking about it on stream, I think. It kind of came up, so it's kind of fresh in my mind. But yeah, I mean, I think it's that's part of just the power of the book, is just and part of the power of writing generally. I think in this kind of greater mythology sort of, it's one of the themes in the mythology generally, is the power of the written word to transform the things around it, and including especially the human mind. So I think that's really kind of a big part of what's going on there. I mean, notably the In the Mouth of Madness adaptation with Sam Neill, 20 years ago.
Oh, I've never seen that.
Oh, it's a good one. That's probably the best one. Recommended. That's one I've seen.
There aren't many good ones, so
there are not, but that one's pretty good. So
okay, that's good.
I didn't know I recommend it to you.
That's a good. I didn't know he was in it. That's a good reason to see it.
Yeah, and he's very good in it. So, but yeah, I mean, I think that's just part of the power. The power of the mythology. I mean, I'm playing another game that has sort of similar elements, although I haven't really gotten to them much yet, in Alan Wake. Which is much more Stephen King horror, which is not generally cosmic horror. I mean, they're explicitly referencing Stephen King multiple times. It's very much that and the Pacific Northwest, but here you are getting, I mean, in Alan Wake, you are getting sort of the power of the word to change the world. And I mean, I think that's right. I mean, of course, that's a thing writers want to write about. That's how important we are. The very things that we write can change the universe around us, right? So it's quite common to find that, especially in horror fiction. But that's how I read that, is that just reading the words, like that anybody could read the words and maybe be brought back into that and experience it so deeply, right, that they feel like they're there.
Yeah, I don't remember, maybe you do, but does she have when you finish the Pious Augustus section, does she have a reaction to finishing that chapter? Like, does she kind of gasp or you know what I mean, have some sort of physical reaction or mental reaction when she comes kind of back to reality, quote unquote?
She does, in that she's able now to translate the page on the wall.
But I mean, does she like feel? Is it almost like she's astrally
projected? Yeah, I mean.
Anyway, we can look out for it.
I mean, she's kind of staring. She's kind of this stare, right? I mean, it's hard to say. It's hard to get that kind of performance necessarily.
Sure. I just think it's good. To your point, I think it's good that my point about Assassins versus this, which is a total aside, or but is that I think it's good that we can have our own theories about what's happening in this case. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
whether
I agree.
It is explicit or not. And Assassins, they very much, as far as I understand.
In the fourth playthrough, everything's explained, Tim.
Okay, the fourth playthrough. Wait, right. Are there four of them?
I think you have to play each color and then play purple. Isn't that
the purple? So purple unlocks, because purple is the sort of big.
I think purple is the four. I think there was a fourth playthrough that you actually have to do.
Oh man, I was half thinking about playing.
I'm totally going to do it. Why not?
Are you?
Yeah, why not?
Why? Okay, I have some reasons why not, but
I'll just after Thanksgiving, I'll have 3 days where I'll just be like, okay, I'm just going to mainline Eternal Darkness for 3 days.
It would be easier to play them, in tandem, because, you just have finished a section. You just, you're so fresh, right? You could
you just keep going.
Section three more times.
It
would be interesting to play the purple version. Yeah, we're going to have to compare. So now we've moved up to, we've barely gotten to Pious. And then you were describing kind of his the key beats for him. So why don't you continue?
Right. So he talks to his men. They're searching for something. He kind of is also kind of looking around and stumbles upon some pillars that have some writing on them. He gets zapped with electricity. one assumes, and appears underground in a buried temple. They're in the desert, so some vanished civilization. I think it even says that this is hundreds of years dead, maybe thousands, and he kind of wanders through this place where there are undead that he's attacked by. No sanity effects yet, and he makes his way through some pretty light puzzles, so light that I don't even specifically remember a puzzle in there. So they must be very light indeed.
No, they're just putting things into.
It's really just picking stuff up and putting things down, right? I mean, there's nothing. Yeah, you put the granite blocks and things. Yeah, very lock and key, very simple. And the ultimate thing that happens to him is that he's called on to make a choice between one of three colors, and then what happens to him after that is that he basically zombifies, I guess you'd say, right? Becomes a ghoul or a zombie, but he hasn't lost his intelligence, so maybe he's a lich. I don't even really know what to describe him as at that point.
Oh man, you're such a D&D nerd.
Yeah, well, I mean, what is he, right? I mean, he's still got a lot of skin.
I know, it's a debate for the ages.
His lips have rotted away and peeled back, and his teeth are exposed. I mean, he's like a rotting skeleton, I guess. I don't know.
No, but you're correct. He's probably not technically a zombie, but
right, because he's not out there for brains. He's still got his intelligence, and that actually is the big part that's super surprising to me, is that you make a choice at that point that you know nothing about.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely remember it being a thing that was talked about, right? And it helps with the water cooler talk that we always talk about too, and blah, blah, blah. And, but it's sort of the cardinal sin of not educating the player on a very critical decision. And as Brett alluded to, you can play the game and make the decision 3 different times and have some differences in the game, the playthrough based on that. And so there's some replayability there that, as we talked about on the podcast many times, was a bit of a macro goal for the industry, for better or for worse. I would say for worse, of like, we want more replayability. We want more time investment for the players. So let's allow them to play 3 different playthroughs, with differences. And my suspicion as we go through this is that the differences aren't big enough to really justify it. But I mean,
even if they were, the fact is, actually, especially if they were, would probably be the bigger sin. If the play styles were really, really different, that would even be a bigger problem for this choice, because you make this choice, you literally have no idea. I mean, except some vague text that describe each of these symbols, what they might even be about. I mean, I kind of guessed that red meant offensive ability, green meant defensive ability, and blue sounded like magical ability. Or something like that. I mean, that's it. That's really all I could
select. Red?
No, I went with green.
Oh, so did I.
No. No, you said you went. Are you sure you went with green?
Yeah, positive.
I went with something. I must have gone with red then.
Well, the reason I asked red is because my usual gamer self thinks that red is often health-based magic. And you mentioned you had some healing, but then we realized we both had the healing medallion in the second episode.
Well,
so
if I ended up doing the same thing as you, I'll restart. That's fine. It's not like it took very long.
Well, the reason I'm asking is the interesting thing about green, which I did not know because I'm pretty sure in my original playthrough I played blue for whatever reason. And green is associated with one of the 3, obviously, old ones or old gods, and green is associated with insanity. And green is also the color of your insanity bar. And so it seems like the theme with choosing green for me so far has been insanity based. In fact, when Pious is talking to the god that he is pledged allegiance to, and in my case with the green, I don't remember her name or its name, has a female voice. It's talking about insanity and talking about, apparently you can, with the green So yeah, so maybe this is going to end up being, we'll have to talk more about it later, but it will end up being more worthwhile to replay because the gameplay mechanics might change to some degree, which I didn't realize how far they went. But I guess with the Insanity, if you choose green, you get some abilities that allow you to turn enemies insane or control them or something. And I believe with blue, there was some other sort of theme to your gameplay mechanics with the magic or something. So, but to your point, you don't know any of that, right? So, and I did, if the audience is yelling at their listening devices, I did read the manual. So I made sure that there wasn't something in there that told you.
I should do that.
Now it talks about the magic, mechanics and stuff, but it doesn't say you're going to come to this point in the game and make this choice and choose between, this is what the choice means. So that was a fear of mine that I thought of, was like, oh wait, maybe they wanted you to read that in the manual, because we're still a little bit in that era that we've gotten called out on before on that. But yeah, it's just weird because you're sitting in clearly an important moment and they definitely want you to think that it's an important moment, but you have no idea what it's gonna. So yeah, it's not my favorite.
Yeah, it's weird because we played Kingdom Hearts as well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I totally picked green. I'm watching my stream. I'm an idiot. Okay, well I'll replay that. Yeah, weird. Sorry about that. I don't know why. Okay. I just I'm a dummy. I literally looked at your text and I don't know why. Yeah.
Maybe you read.
Don't pick green. Don't pick green. Don't pick green. Oh, look, green.
Well, I probably won't have time to replay, but if
I'll just start it over. It's like an hour. Oh,
I don't think it's the end of the world if we have the same one. It just felt interesting if we chose different ones.
No. We shouldn't. I'll do it. It's not a big deal. There's no time at all to do that, so it's fine.
In Kingdom Hearts, though, I feel like it was similarly weird. But
it is similarly weird, but they're telling you, you're going to have more defensive power if you choose this. You're going to give up magic power to do this, right? Yeah. And that's kind of my point. Is like they were being very clear. I mean, and that was just to pick something we played from the very same year. Was like, no, look, this means this thing that you're doing. If this is the kind of player you like to go and smack things, then you want this. You want the sword. If you like to hang back and cast magic, you probably want this thing over here, right? And if you like to, turtle, then you want to be this character, and give up the things you don't like or whatever. And this is not that at all. This is definitely like, I don't know. I guess this one. So
each one is associated with which again, you would know maybe from reading the manual, but you don't fully understand it. Each color is associated with one of your main resources.
Right.
So that's a correlation you could potentially make as well. But again, the repercussions of your choice are really not known. And there's also seems to be story implications to it as well. In fact, you'll get different cutscenes and things like that. So,
oh, cool. I'll go back and pick blue or something then. I should have picked red, because I knew it was not red. Anyway.
Anyway, so it's a weird choice. And then the other thing, so then you finish his section and he ends in his lich form, as I think Brett has appropriately identified.
Yeah. Knucklehead lich.
Knucklehead lich. Yeah. It's in the monster manual that way. And then you're transported back to Alex. There's a little bit more gameplay there. So the first thing I wanted to talk about there is sort of you start to see the structure because you're introduced to these pages, and
the pages. Bring me the pages, the blue pages.
Nice. Wow, a callback to the podcast. Very good.
Another game that begins with narration where you're not really sure. Who's coming, who's a character.
Oh, yeah. Or what, whose motivations or what and such. Yeah.
Yep.
And ultimately, your decision there doesn't mean too much either.
Yeah.
But, so then you see the mechanic as it seems like, or the structures, it seems like you're going to return to Alex throughout the game. she's going to find the next page, and then you're going to read the page, quote unquote, from the book or insert it into the book, and then you'll play as another character. And in this case, the second chapter we played was this woman that it's Angkor Wat, probably, right, is where it takes place.
It's
Angkor Thom, yeah. So in Cambodia. I don't remember her name, but again, reinforcing this concept of playing as different characters in different locations across history. And it's pretty cool. It just gives you different flavor. I wrote a note down that I feel like the two characters played, like, from a statistics standpoint, played a little differently. Like, I felt like her sprint was faster than his sprint. Like, he was a little more cumbersome.
Yeah, he's definitely more
bulky.
Yeah.
And she had like a faster sword, and then her blow gun and things like that. So they're introducing these interesting. There's traps in that level. Different. Obviously, you're in a Cambodian setting, which was cool. So, the structure is kind of starting to dawn on you as you're playing the game, and both kind of daunting and overwhelming to think that, oh my god. And then, in fact, the one thing the manual does show you is it actually lays out all the characters you're going to be playing, which I was surprised to see, because I didn't remember that. Because in some ways it's a bit of a spoiler, right? I don't know if it shows everybody, but it shows many of them.
But I don't think you playing it the first time would necessarily. It's very quick. I'm not sure you would necessarily understand that. Maybe. I don't know.
What do you mean?
All these characters you're going to play.
Oh, yeah. No. I just, once it's starting to dawn on you, though, that you are going to be playing as characters, I guess all I'm saying is, being somebody who does care about the lore and sort of like spoilers and things, there's characters that you're seeing in the manual that I would rather not know that I'm going to play as.
Oh.
Because they're kind of like, it's cool that, I'm going to play as that person. That's neat. But now it's not a surprise. So that was my only point.
That's true. Yeah. Another reason not to read the manual, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, I don't typically do. I don't want to. But I think the listeners.
This is definitely a boundary game as far as that. I mean, I think at this time it's pretty unusual to have to. I think that was changing at this time. We were definitely. I mean, I don't even remember if we had one for Republic Commando. We had them for the Starfighter games, but it definitely felt like the pressures of manufacturing costs were already driving them out. Like how many pages it could be was like who can we put in the credits, right? How many pages are we going to have of credits? The game credits can be forever, but the printed credits you got to be careful of, because pages and whatever. I definitely remember that being a thing.
Well, there was another reason too that I think we've talked about on the podcast before, because of this whole topic, is I think that there was a concerted effort in the industry at the time to actually embrace good usability for games in general. Like there was, there was
at least good in-game tutorialization.
Well, yeah, there's this designer's dilemma or developer's dilemma of, wouldn't it be great to make games where you didn't need the manual? That means you're making a game.
Like, for example, Super Mario Brothers.
Yeah.
The original.
Zelda, right? It's always Zelda, been there. It's just whatever. I feel like we've had this topic many times, is whether it's laziness or you ran out of time or all these reasons, but there's good and bad reasons for it. But ego, yeah. But I think it's actually kind of a lofty good goal generally. But to the listener's point, sometimes
and of course I'm reminded of I can't remember his name, for Warcraft, like having a heavier box.
Bill Roper,
yes.
Oh yeah, right.
Having a manual and a notepad in there, so the box is
empty notepad. Yeah, that's good. That old chestnut.
Put a heavier box. You got to be worth more.
Computer figurine in there too. Throw that in.
That's right.
Yeah, but I don't remember why we were talking about that. What was my point?
Your point was in-game tutorialization, usability, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. So but I was going to use it as a segue to one of the other notes that I have down in this category, and where I don't have proof of this, but I will will bring it up in that I think I'm going to guess that it's true, in that I think the onboarding in this game is much better than it deserves to, than it should be. And I'm thinking that's probably Nintendo's oversight influence on the game. I think that they were the one thing I was surprised and delighted to see, to experience again with this game, is I think they could have thrown a lot more of the mechanics at you and systems at you sooner than they did. Like, for instance, Insanity in general doesn't come in until the second chapter, which is a core part of the game. They're very judiciously rolling this stuff out in a very, in my opinion, Nintendo way. And yes, there's still tutorials and they're still a little heavy-handed with it, but at least it's not, I feel like in, say, Resident Evil or other cases that, they're not that careful with it. So I'd like to think that maybe Nintendo is having a little bit more, like, for instance, we've played essentially technically 3 chapters, though the first thing is really just a prologue. We have yet to touch magic other than that medallion, which is a whole nother, and by this amount of time in, a lot of games would just have already thrown all this stuff at you and you get overwhelmed. So,
right.
I would hope that would be Nintendo's influence on some of that stuff. Right. Maybe it was Silicon Knights.
Yeah. It's hard to say. I mean, because there's kind of more of a, I don't even know. I was going to say more of a Metroid kind of style to it, in the sense of like adding mechanics additively that stick around for the rest of the game after that, rather than sort of a Mario style, which is like, oh, go and for this handful of levels, you're going to have this mechanic to deal with, and then you probably won't see a ton of it again. We just built a bunch of levels around this new thing, this new idea we incorporated. It's not really all Mario games, but some of them definitely have that kind of feel. And then Zelda, I guess, is more of a choose what works for you to some degree, as well as enemy puzzling. Like this, definitely use this weapon against that enemy type stuff. I don't know. I have to really think about that, and whether that influence is really a Nintendo thing or just really them maybe slowing down the introduction of mechanics in order to allow because they had a sense that the audience needed time to catch up. And, maybe they were right from their standpoint, again, pointing back at the sales in Japan. So I don't know.
Yeah.
It's hard to say. I mean, I think there's a big cultural clash issue there as well.
I guess my core point really just comes down to, I was surprised at how by the time we finished this session, which wasn't terribly long, but we're already 3 characters in. We've played as 3 characters. I was surprised at how judicious they are being with
that's fair.
Key aspects of the game.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Fair.
To the point, not to go back to the manual point, but I think in this era, especially era before this, especially on PC, a lot of reliance, and I don't want to say laziness, but reliance on the manual would be the case, right? They would start you with Insanity, with magic, with combat, and just expect you to figure it out.
Yeah.
But here it's like, no, they've actually kind of pretty elegantly written into the characters in these early chapters why they would not have these aspects, right? Yeah. Pious, they don't really explain why he doesn't go insane. Maybe it's just
he gives up his body rather than his mind, it seems.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's more of a choice for him. You know what I mean? But then the second character, which I'm forgetting her name,
I think.
She talks about, she's reading from the book and kind of wants to know more about this world, but isn't really sure what it means. And then it starts happening to her. And of course she's going to react to it because it's so foreign to her. And it's not, to your point, not a choice. But then she has this medallion. And I think the medallion is a good example of like, okay, let's dull out magic a little bit, but it's not the whole magic system. So you get this sense of what it means to heal yourself with magic, but you're not having, as you will find out later, the magic system can get pretty elaborate, but it's a very simple version of that. So it's, you know what I mean? It's a nice introduction is all. And so I was happily surprised by that and just didn't remember that.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. I think probably we should put a pin in it there. You actually have been kind of driving the production on this one in terms of what we're playing, and I don't remember what you wanted to do next. And actually, we have feedback, but I'm going to hold off until next week, make this one a little shorter and sweeter. Tim's on the road. I am recovering from an illness, and so I actually need to get to bed soon.
So you need to go to bed. I'm recording from a hotel.
Yeah.
It's the first time we've done that, I think. Yeah. Which is exciting and fun. We do it for you, folks. We do it for you. So the next session was going to be three chapters.
Okay, so, three full chapters. Though,
we're going to do essentially 3 if you count. So the first session was 3 if you count 0, 3, 4, 4, 3. So next session is 4.
That adds up to too many.
There's 13 total.
Right. So 3, 4, 4, 3 is 14.
Oh, okay. So
I think you stole one from the second session. I think 3, 3, 4, 3.
Okay, if that checks out, then
yeah, that adds up to 13. So let's go with the next 3.
Okay, next 3. So yeah. Anyway, I'll tell you offline. Which I guess you just get the pages.
Just get the pages, play the next 3 pages. Yeah. I opened the guide. It's fine. I'll put it in the show notes. I'll figure it out. It's fine. I wanted to at least shout out the folks who sent in a review, which was Chris7, I believe. And we had an email a quite long email from Derek in Spokane. Sorry, Derek and Chris, we're going to do you probably next week. Derek's email in particular is quite long, so I definitely wanted to hold off on that because I think there's maybe multiple questions in there. It's quite involved about a number of things, and another person who's like, combos. That's just its own thing. Conversation. The whole fighting game thing, it just keeps coming back with the combos.
We'll never escape that.
We'll never cheese their hunger away.
Lurking Horror is the last page we will play.
Okay, good. Oh, that's a good one. That's a good name.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is an Infocom game.
Is it really?
Did you ever play that one?
No, I never played that one.
Also a Cthulhu-inspired game.
Well, it's a very Cthulhu name for sure.
It's and it's set in a university at night, and I want to say the electricity goes out and you're eaten by not a grue, but something awfully gross in the dark. Good game. Recommended. Infocom game from the early days. Anyway, thank you for sending those reviews into the sort of iOS infrastructure. I get those from pretty much all over the world. If you want to review us somewhere else and have me either read or sing your review on air, I will happily do so, but you have to let me know where it appeared so I can find it, or just send it to me and tell me what song, if it's a singing review, it came from. Otherwise, you can shoot email with feedback to devgameclub@gmail.com. We don't necessarily read everything on the show, but we do at least reply to everything. You can also find us on the web at devgameclub.com and on Twitter, where I man the tables at devgameclub. But you can also find my podcast co-host there at
Tim Longo Jr. with a JR at the end.
And from the road and from the very near edge of sleep, I say good night.
Good night. Isn't Edge of Sleep also?
I think that's the 8th level.
That's a Lovecraft story, right?
I don't think so.